In January 1914, much of the world's cutting-edge technology operated at the edge of its theoretical limits. While the broad principles of physics and engineering were well established, the specific, repeatable numbers required to scale them were still being refined. In aeronautics, the prevailing consensus among engineers was that a weight limit existed for sustained flight. It was widely believed that any aircraft exceeding 4,000 kilograms would simply be too heavy to stay in the air. In medicine, physicians were frequently baffled by cases of extreme emaciation and systemic collapse. Lacking a structural understanding of the body's internal regulatory systems, they often misdiagnosed these fatal hormonal failures as tuberculosis. This began to change during a 28-day window in February 1914. Within that single month, a series of calculations, patents, and test flights occurred that moved several disparate fields from theoretical approximation toward empirical certainty. This shift toward rigid measurement provided the technical framework necessary to transition from the artisanal production of the 19th century to the high-capacity systems of the 20th. The month's first major shift occurred in Cambridge. For over 50 years, the Riemann Hypothesis had remained a purely theoretical proposition regarding the distribution of prime numbers. In February 1914, mathematician G.H. Hardy published a 4-page paper in the journal Comptes Rendus. He didn't claim to have solved the entire hypothesis, but he proved a structural necessity that moved the theory into the realm of confirmed fact. Hardy proved infinitely many zeros of the Riemann Zeta function lie exactly on a critical line where the real part equals 1/2. Confirming they follow this exact path proved the hypothesis was a structural reality rather than a lucky guess. Hardy's work provided the concrete mathematical bedrock required for all subsequent research into complex numerical systems. As Hardy worked in Cambridge, German physician Morris Simmonds was investigating patients suffering from premature aging and total physical failure. On February 12th, Simmonds published a clinical description in Deutsche Medizinische Wochenschrift. He identified that his patients weren't dying of a respiratory infection, but because their pituitary gland's anterior lobe had been destroyed. Located at the base of the brain, the pituitary gland is only the size of a pea. He had identified the body's master switch. This tiny node produces hormones dictating metabolism, growth, and stress response, acting as the primary control center. By pinpointing this specific point of failure, Simmonds allowed medicine to move past vague symptoms and begin managing the body as a precisely interconnected system. These breakthroughs were happening simultaneously across the globe. Robert Goddard spent that February in a ward of iron beds, recovering from tuberculosis, while calculating the mathematical foundations of rocket propulsion. Goddard realized that a rocket doesn't need air to push against. It achieves thrust by pushing against its own exhaust mass. This calculation proved that sustained travel in a vacuum was a physical reality. In Moscow, Igor Sikorsky challenged the existing limits of aviation. He built the Ilya Muromets, a plane with 4 engines and a passenger saloon, and flew its 4,500-kilogram frame to 2,000 meters. In Detroit, Ford engineers spent the month iterating. They adjusted the speed and height of a mechanized assembly belt until they found the exact rhythm at which workers and machinery could operate continuously. The result was an assembly time for a single chassis that dropped from over 12 hours to exactly 93 minutes. Meanwhile, Willis Carrier received a patent for an apparatus for treating air, a system that allowed the temperature and humidity of a room to be managed as a unified, predictable environment. Across aviation, manufacturing, and climate control, February 1914 saw experimental prototypes reach the thresholds of efficiency needed to become functioning global utilities. These 6 men were working in isolation, scattered across Worcester, Moscow, Cambridge, Detroit, and Germany. There was no shared awareness between them. No central network existed to inform them that they were all participating in the same transition toward empirical precision. Yet their work that month provided the proof required to convert experimental designs into the reliable, high-capacity systems we use today. Modern life relies on these 1914 measurements, from algorithms managing our data to logistics moving our goods, and medicine regulating our health. We live in a world built on the specific, repeatable numbers that were quietly locked into place during those 28 days.